Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whoever listened to this episode 233 of the Tree Talk podcast. Myself, Jack Neville, and Matt O'Callaghan of the Weekly Observer and Vale Star. We have a special guest from Tipp joining us shortly after introduction as Limerick prepare to head to Thurles for a do or die Munster Senior Hurling Championship game. We're going to look back on the first round of the Tailteann Cup, Limerick getting the win over Longford, and not too long to rest now before they play Carroll this weekend. And obviously the minors ending a long wait for a bit of silver with a phase one win over Tipperary last weekend. So stay tuned for all that and more.
The impression the game you get out of it, what you put into, it's like a walk of life. If you're good enough, go out and get it, no more about it.
But not so much control in the centre of the field from Kilkenny as Richie Bennett sends it high and over the bar.
Your mother sends you down to the shop for a pound's worth of goods and she gives you 50 pence. You can't get the pound's worth of goods, can you?
Just about kept in. Oh, well done, Johnny Buckley. To do that to Tomas O'Shea, he deserves to score from here. One of the highlights of the Sunday game.
Limerick went out there from the word court today. No more about it. They made all the running, that was it. Put the ball over the bar and the back of it, and that's it. No ifs, no buts.
Is there much time left? We have a couple of injuries. Here comes Kieran Carey. Carey leading the charge of the right brigade. 45 metres out. He's a chance to score. He's put it hard. He's put it over.
There's no sympathy in this game for anybody.
The sun is shining. It's Munster Championship hurling weekend. We have Paul Carroll from Tipp FM joining us. Paul, how are you keeping?
Lads, how are you getting on?
Good.
How are you, Paul?
Oh, good. Thanks for having me.
I suppose you can kind of feel it in the air. It's a huge game this weekend. Limerick versus Tipperary. I know they've played each other in Munster finals in recent years, but from a Tipp point of view, is there kind of a palpable sense that this is a chance to inflict a huge blow on Limerick?
Yeah, there is, but there's also the worry that nearly too much has been made about Limerick. You know, they only lost by a point to Clare, but it's kind of like, you know, no one is afraid to go too far ahead of themselves and say, geez, if Cork beat Clare, we've the chance to knock Limerick out of the Munster Championship, you know. So there's definitely, as you said, it's palpable. There's a lot of excitement. You know, I think they reckon it's going to be 46,000 odds in Semple Stadium, so which is the capacity, like, so it's just going to be an unbelievable occasion. And as you said, the sun is shining. I think Sunday's to be a fine day as well. But yeah, I suppose this Tipp panel have had a lot of pain, I suppose, against Limerick in the last couple of years. And I think since John Kiely came in, I think there's been 6 championship games in the Munster between them, and Limerick have won all 5, and the only one Tipp one was that kind of basically dead rubber in, was it 2019 or that, like, you know. So if it comes to 4 o'clock on Sunday and Cork have beaten Clare, it will definitely add to the occasion if it's that kind of jeopardy hanging over the match, that if Limerick lose, they're out. So it's going to be a special occasion anyway.
Yeah, John Kiely kind of spoke about sheltering the players before, and it was more in line with, you know, the hype around it. But is there any way the players will go out into that field on 4 o'clock on Sunday and not know what happened earlier?
I was thinking that when I was driving in here. I was like, what way will they manage that now? Like 2 o'clock is when that game throws in, like, you know, so the players will be probably just in the stadium maybe, or over in Dr. Morris Park. Like, they'll hear, like, because even if you're training in or if they're doing the warm-up out in Dr. Morris Park while the football is on and running into the stadium, someone will say, oh, jeez, Cork are after being bet or Clare after being bet. Like, the players will know, but it's how, I wonder how they will manage that. But yeah, the players will know either way, I would imagine. But I don't think they'll need any extra motivation from that. Like, there's been kind of some talk of, will Tipp, you know, might have an eye on the Waterford game and be like, will we rest a few lads? I don't think so. I think with this Tipp panel, because they've lost to Limerick so much, and Liam Cahill as well has had his losses with Waterford against Limerick, that if they have the chance to knock them out, they're going to go all guns blazing, and Limerick will be going all guns blazing as well if they have to win to stay in the championship. So it's just set up perfectly.
Yeah, Matt, just you quickly there. You know, Limerick like to prepare meticulously, and we know that with John Kiely and Kinnerk. But you know, do you allow the lads to know what the score is? Do you tell them, look, Clare beat Cork or Cork beat Clare, we have to win, or do you kind of hope that they avoid it somehow?
Well, I'm not so sure that is there any way that you can shield them from it, you know, because technology is such now and everybody has access to it in their pockets. So in an ideal scenario, you would try and shield them from it, but I think you're looking for the impossible in that, and I agree with Paul. There is no way. But I would just like to ask Paul there, if Cork beat Clare and we said Tipperary have the opportunity of knocking Limerick out, does he believe that would bring extra pressure on Tipperary?
I'm not sure. It's hard to know, because I suppose the Tipp lads know going in, no matter what, that if they beat Waterford, they will go through. So it's kind of not a no-lose situation, but they have that backdrop, I suppose, that if they were to not get over the line against Limerick, that they have Waterford to come. And that's I know Waterford aren't going well, but you'd imagine Davy, last game of the season, Liam Cal, there's a lot going on there, so you don't want to be resting on your laurels. But yeah, it probably would add maybe a little bit more pressure, maybe down the stretch, that oh, here we go, this is our chance to get one back over Limerick. So yeah, it probably would add a little bit more, I'd imagine.
Yeah, and talking about pressure, obviously these teams met at the same time, same round last year, and Tipp were on the floor and Limerick were flying, and it took until, I suppose, the last 5 or 10 minutes in the Gaelic rounds that Limerick eventually pulled away. And you're completely changing the narrative now that Limerick are kind of on the back foot, and again, it's that dealing with pressure. How do you think Tipp will cope with that?
I think compared to last year, that performance, Tipp were as poor as Tipp were last year. They still put a good 60 minutes against Limerick, but we've seen that in the last few years. They put a very good 35 minutes against Limerick there in the Munster final a couple of years ago, and we saw what happened in the second half. So I don't know, and I think we're Tipp ahead in the league semi-final there. Now I know that was only the league at halftime as well, so I think Tipp could be 20 points up at halftime, and they'd be thinking, right, we need to get it to 40 points because the Limerick will come back. But I think Tipp won't, if they're ahead, they know that Limerick can come back, and they'll be expecting something from Limerick. But Tipp are in a much better place, I think, than they were last year, just in terms of the panel. Liam Cal has brought along so many players that maybe people in Tipp didn't even expect. Johnny Ryan is having a great year, cornerback. I don't think if you asked any of the kind of pundits around Tipperary at the start of the year who they think would start cornerback in the championship, it probably wouldn't have been Johnny Ryan. But after the league, you would have said, oh, it's definitely going to be Johnny Ryan. So Tipp are in a much better place, and they're a much fitter team than they were last year. I think if it was last year down in Páirc Uí Chaoimh, up by 5 points, 10 minutes to go, Cork rattle off 1-2 in about 90 seconds, and suddenly it's a draw game. I think last year's Tipp probably would have faltered, but this year's Tipp went down, ball broke off Jake Morris, Dan McCormick into Mark Keogh and back of the net. So I think Tipp are in a much better place than they were last year. But even the whole kind of narrative of Limerick being on the back foot, they bet Waterford, and fair enough, we've seen that Waterford have gone kind of poor, but the 1 point loss to Limerick, and it changes the kind of whole narrative. If that was a draw game or a 1 point swing the other way, it would have been, oh, this Limerick team, they just can't lose. So it's very hanging in the balance, the way people think. And I've been thinking about that the last 2 weeks. Limerick have had 3 weeks to prepare for this game as well. So I think we're going to see a very hungry Limerick on Sunday, which mightn't be good for Tipp, but Tipp will be ready, hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully it won't be too good for Tipp. You kind of mentioned there the kind of fine margins with Limerick losing by a point and how the narrative has shifted. For Tipperary, how important was it that that draw with Cork that could have gone either way, that they didn't lose, essentially? When you said last year probably would have faltered, that they held on for the draw, probably should have won, but still got a point out of it.
Oh, it's massive, because even if Tipp won that game, it'd still probably be looking at the same scenario. We need to win one of our last 2 games to be sure. So to come out with something was unbelievable. I remember 10 minutes to go. If you asked any Tipp lad, would you take a draw? They'd be like, oh, not a chance. We're 5 points up here. We're flying it. But with 5 minutes to go, when Cork got that 1-2, and I've never heard a place as loud as Páirc Uí Chaoimh was that day, and the Rebels chants and the Blackrock ended flares, the whole lot. It was geez, I blow it up now, ref, and give us the draw kind of thing. So that was a massive point for Tipperary, and it kind of continues the bit of momentum built up from the game in Cusack Park. And if you offered Liam Cal at the start of the year 3 points from your 2 away games to start the campaign, I'd say he would have taken that.
Yeah, it's a nice cushion to have. I suppose since those round games, Limerick have obviously lost Sean Finn, and Tipperary have lost Jason Ford. Would you kind of equate those? Obviously, Sean has gone for the year and Jason will be back, but for this game, first and foremost, there would have been a strong possibility they would have been marking each other. Is a kind of equal footing now with both of them losing such key players?
Like, they're kind of players where, as good as both panels are, you can't replace the Sean Finn. There's not another Sean Finn in the country, never mind in Limerick. So there's going to be a drop off there. And similarly enough for us with Jason Ford, while we do have very good forwards, and Mark Keogh come on for Jason Ford last day and scored 1-4, there's more to Jason Ford, like, you know, his free take and his set pieces, and even from play this year. I've noticed this year he's been out in front of his man, one touch in the hand. I don't think I've seen him take a second touch all year nearly. He's been on such good form. So it is a big loss for Tipp. I don't know if they equate to themselves, but it's kind of, they probably do kind of cancel each other out in terms of Limerick can't be saying, oh, we don't have Sean Finn because, you know, we don't have Jason Ford. So, like, you know, losing a star forward like that is probably, and who's your free taker, probably maybe a bit of a bigger blow. But I suppose Gerard O'Connor has been on the freeze during the league. He done very well. He missed a few down in Páirc Uí Chaoimh, and then John McGrath missed that free from the middle of the field late on. So I'd like to think that in the last 2 weeks that, you know, whoever is going to be on the freeze, I would imagine it's going to be Gerard O'Connor, has been, you know, practicing that every day and is probably ready to go. And I think the league experience is huge because he could be over in Dr. Morris Park or below in Temple practicing freeze all day, but it's different in a big stadium, Munster Championship, bit of pressure on you. So it's good that he had that league experience and done right well on the freeze throughout the league. So I'd imagine he'll be on the freeze. But yeah, they're two massive losses, but probably close to cancel each other out.
Yeah, mentioning Gerard there, obviously would have seen him up close and personal with UL himself, Brian O'Meara, John. These boys, they've really added to Tipp this year, and you could see it in the league. And you know, there would have been huge expectations on these lads, but to see him deliver like this in the first 2 rounds, which would be a huge bonus to Liam Cahill.
Yeah, like I suppose there would have been a lot more expectation on Brian O'Meara because he was kind of been touted as he's up next, like he's the next kind of number 6 for this Tipperary team. And all he done with UL and captaining them to Fitzgibbons and things like that. So he was a loss last year because he went off to America, and a couple of them did as well. So he was a loss. But when he was coming back, there was a lot of hype. And even I remember doing Holy Cross Ballycal, their first game of the championship, when he was back last year, there was still a bit of hype, like, oh, here is Brian O'Meara. So there's been a lot of pressure on him, and you know, he's lived up to it. He's been brilliant. If you see him on the ball, there's lads, you know, that when they just strike a ball, you're like, oh, he's a very talented hurler. Like, he just has lovely strike of the ball. He looks like he's been playing in that half back line for the last 4 or 5 years. Never mind, like, his championship debut was against Clare. Like, so he's done really well, and a huge boost because it kind of frees up. A few times we've had Ronan Maher just hanging around the edge of the D, kind of as a free man roaming around there, like, and you know, having Brian O'Meara there, that frees up Ronan, and that's kind of when Ronan's at his best, when he's allowed to just kind of roam around. But for Gerard O'Connor, I think he surprised a lot of people. I think a lot of people knew, you know, he's been very good with UL, but will that translate over to Tipp? And I'd like, he has surprised me anyway, because he's added a lot of size. He's a big man, but he's, you know, for a young lad, he's well able to win his own ball. Great work rate. You know, he got that goal against Cork as well, which has been huge. Like, he's been a big bonus, because I don't think at the start of the year, similar enough to Johnny Ryan, I don't think he would have been one where you're like, yeah, Gerard O'Connor will be starting in the half forward line, no question about it. And that's where he is now. You know, it'd be a huge shock if he wasn't in the starting 15 come Sunday. So yeah, they've been 2 big boosts for Tipperary, and there's a few more scattered around the squad as well.
Yeah, another one that I'd mention is Alan Tynan, and obviously himself and William O'Donoghue had that fine battle in the Gaelic rounds, and whatever happened in the meantime happened. But that's such an interesting subplot, and you know, Alan really for ye has taken on a kind of, you know, inspirational role. He doesn't just get a normal point; it's a huge score for him. And Will Donoghue's the same for Limerick, mightn't score as much, but wins turnovers and frees and stuff. It's, you know, 2 old school midfielders going at it. It's really like something exciting.
Yeah, like, there's 2 absolute, you know, battle axes in the middle of the field. Like, Alan Tynan, like, you know, he's obviously, everyone knows about him playing rugby with Munster and the Ireland under-20s, and you know, he wasn't kind of hurling for a couple of years there. Came back with Ross Gray last year, and you know, they ended up winning the Premier Intermediate last year, and you know, he was very good for that Ross Gray team, but he looks a different player even since then. Like, the training, and it's a credit to all the Tipp coaching staff, because he's come on a huge amount. He's always had that kind of raw talent, and it's just his confidence. And Joe Alan Tynan taking shots out on the sideline, out near the 65 on the run, and they're going over the bar. Like it's, as you said, it's pure inspirational stuff. But he just goes all day, and he has that rugby background. I've played against him a few times. The like tougher it gets, and the kind of more in your face it gets in around the middle of the field, he kind of thrives off that. So I'd say he'll be hopping off the side on Sunday, and I'd say the throw-in will be interesting as well. I've heard that mentioned as well about himself and Will O'Donoghue. So I'd say, is it Sean Stack refereeing, or who's refereeing on Sunday? They'll have to just throw the ball in fairly quick and not waste too much time.
Yeah, get in there and swallow the whistle. Matt, we often see, forwards and backs in these dream matchups and things, but I think Will O'Donoghue and Alan Tynan will be worth admission fee alone on Sunday.
It will, because I suppose there's a bit of history there. So it will be very interesting. And you're talking about two players here, Jack, that are on the top of their form in this present championship. Like William O'Donoghue had arguably his best game ever for Limerick against Clare. And we've seen Alan Tynan turning in back-to-back performances. And I agree totally with Paul there, because there has been a transformation in the Alan Tynan of Roscrea and the Alan Tynan of Tipperary. He has come on so much. It's incredible, because I saw that Munster final with Mona Lean, and like we're talking about a different player altogether now. He has evolved with the Tipperary thing, but I'm just wondering there during our discussion so far, Paul. The transformation in Tipperary of 2022 to the 2023 is, I suppose, it's down to a number of factors. Perhaps there's a Cahill factor, and the fact that he was involved with two All-Ireland winning teams, an under-21 and an under-20 winning team in back-to-back years, and the impact of the newcomers. And we didn't mention Sean Ryan at all.
Yeah, no, like Sean Ryan is another one. He's as I was saying earlier, there's a few more of them. Like he's one. Like I remember at the very start of January, Tipp played Clare inside Nina here in the Munster Hurling League, and Sean Ryan was corner forward, and he was electric. Like it was kind of like, geez, we have another great forward. Like, and I remember at the start of the year at that time, Liam Cal mentioned he said we have a number of project players that we're working on, and he was like, we mightn't see him this year, but we're working on a couple of these players, and I'd say a couple of them have maybe gone a year forward in their progression, maybe like they're a year ahead. And I think Sean Ryan is one of them. Like he's looked really good. He had the dream start to his championship campaign, coming off the bench and scoring a goal with his first touch against Clare in Cusack Park, and then against Cork, like he got taken off. I think it was at half time. Conor Bowe come on, but he was actually making all the right runs. He was out in front of Damien Cahalane, but the first touch was just a little bit off, and Damien Cahalane is so good that he was right up behind him, flicking the ball away. And he was away. So he'd a tough going down in Páirc Uí Chaoimh, but he was still doing the right things. It was just one of those days that didn't happen for him. But he's another impact player that Tipp do have, and another player that wasn't involved last year. So there's kind of a big difference in kind of mood, I think, around the squad from last year. And it just seems to be a lot more positive words coming out. Like, so they seem to just be a little bit better prepared, both kind of physically and maybe a bit tactically as well. But we'll see come Sunday.
Paul, the concession of 7 goals and 42 points in the 2 games to date, I suppose it sends a message that there is defensive work to be done yet.
Oh, definitely, yeah. So it's been a bit gung-ho. It's made for 2 great games to commentate on and be there for. But Liam Cal has mentioned it after both games, that especially after the Clare game, he wasn't happy with the concession of those goals. And even after Cork, he seemed to be that we had improved a bit, but there was still mistakes at the back. So one thing, and yourselves will know as well, is that Tipp's defending of aerial ball in the full back line isn't the best. So Peter Casey's goal in the league semi-final, I think, was Colin Coughlin hitting a ball. I think he was going for a point. He was far out and it dropped into the edge of the square, and Peter Casey snapped it, turned, bang, goal. And it was like a very similar goal scored by Mark Rogers for Clare against Tipp. So it is a worry, but it's kind of something that, we luckily enough we seem to be so far in the 2 championship games, we're able to get a few goals, we're able to keep the scoreboard ticking, but it's going to have to stay that way because like although bar that goal against Limerick in the league semi-final, that was a strange game. There wasn't a lot of there wasn't any goal chances bar that Peter Casey goal. But it is definitely a worry in Tipp about, you know, we're kind of slack at defence, and the first half against Clare, you know, Clare could, and even the first 5 minutes against Cork, Patrick Horgan batted one wide. Johnny Ryan threw himself out in front of a ball and blocked it out for a 65, and then there was the goal. And against Clare, they coughed up a few big goal chances in the first half. Aidan McCarthy picked a wrong pass at one stage. They could have taken one on for a goal, but they put it over the bar, and Barry Hogan made that brilliant save before half time. So like, we've conceded 7, but it could have been more. So it's definitely a bit of a concern, well, more than a bit of a concern, especially coming up against, you know, likes of Galan and co. if they're in form.
Yeah. You were talking there. You know, we said there during the John Kiley era that you know, Tipperary have only registered 1 win out of 6, which is correct. Is there a bit of a mental block about Limerick now? Because if you look back to the 2021 Munster final, when, you know, we were ready to go home at half time, and in many ways the recent league final mirrored that, in that, you know, Tipperary were practically out of sight, but Limerick came back in the second half, and, you know, from practically impossible situations.
I think you'd be kind of silly to say there's nothing in the Tipperary lads' heads. Like, I think if you've suffered the defeats Tipp have to Limerick in the manner that Tipp have, it's obviously going to have some effect. But I think with Cahill and the lads there, I think that could even be a thing that spurs Tipperary on a little bit more. That if it comes, as I was saying, 4 o'clock on Saturday and Cork after beating Clare, I think Cal and Mikey Beavens and the lads will have the lads like ready to go, like, this is it now, this is your chance, and Tipp might feel like this is our time kind of thing. But it definitely, it will, like, you know, this isn't just a normal Munster Championship match against, you know, any of the teams like that. And you could say that about nearly any Munster Championship match, that there's an extra bite. But like, it will be on the Tipperary players' minds, but I don't think it would necessarily be a bad thing coming down the stretch. I just feel like it's a little bit different this time for Tipp, but you know, Limerick definitely have the psychological advantage anyway over this group of Tipperary players.
John Kiley was at pains before the championship started, and you probably heard him a couple of times, Paul, saying that, you know, he was expecting the most competitive round robin series since it was inaugurated. He's almost 100% right in it. One of it have fallen off the ledge a bit, but the other 4, it's dog eat dog.
Yeah, I think it turns out that John Kiley knows a lot more about the Munster Championship than most pundits. Yeah, he's called it right. Like, I think, as I was saying, I even fell into it myself. Like, as good as Limerick have been the last couple of years, you know, there's a lot of games there where a puck of a ball going a different way, and they would have been bet. Like, it wasn't a thing of Limerick went out every game on the way to an All-Ireland and won by 15 points. Like, I remember, wasn't it Nicky Quaid had that block on one of the Cork lads in the All-Ireland semi-final, I think a couple of years ago, late on, and there's things like that. So it's never as far away. The teams are never as far away as it might appear at the end of the year when Limerick won the Liam McCarthy last 3 years in a row now. So it was always going to be a bit closer, but I think people just did expect Limerick are going to win. They're going to get 8 points in the Munster Championship, onto the Munster final and onto the All-Ireland semi-final, because that's just how it's been the last couple of years. But even last year, like Clare, extra time, things like that. But it's about sustaining it, I suppose. A lot of teams have played brilliant against Limerick, but it's getting over the line. And Clare did that eventually, but it took them a good few tries. So from a Tipperary point of view, hopefully that's what we'll be looking for. But yeah, John Kiley was right. It's a competitive championship, and like it's going to be, you know, it's hard to even predict any of the games. Like, it's hard to even, because anything could happen. I don't think anyone thought, you know, if you said Cork were going to score 4 goals against Tipperary, but Tipp weren't going to lose, you were like, what's after happening in this game, kind of thing. Like, so yeah, it's brilliant though. It's just such a good, like, 5-6 weeks, because, you know, after the games there's so much to talk about, so much to look forward to. So really going to enjoy these last couple of weeks anyway.
Yeah.
Are you confident, Paul, that the Tip will get the job done?
I don't think confident. I'd be like, I'm always optimistic. So you always be thinking that they can win, but I wouldn't be stupid to be thinking, oh, Limerick are on the floor now. They're after losing to Clare. This is it now. I fully expect Limerick to come absolutely flying out of the blocks. They've had 3 weeks now to prepare. John Kiely has proven to be a brilliant man manager and just situation manager. Like, he's had plenty to deal with over his time with Limerick. So I'd imagine he'll have these lads prepared perfect coming in for Sunday. And likewise with Tipperary, like, Liam Cahill, I've plenty of confidence in Liam Cahill and his ability, and we've seen it this year with the improvements Tip have made. So both teams will be prepared as best they can. Am I confident Tip will win? I'm hopeful Tip will win. I can see it in my head, a situation where Tip do win, but I can also see a situation where Limerick wins. So in terms of predictions, all I know is it's going to be a brilliant game. I hope Tip will win. You hope Limerick will win. And 5:30 on Sunday, we'll both have plenty to talk about.
Yeah, that's for sure. It could even be a draw and just kind of keep it going into the final round. But it promises to be a brilliant game, as you said there. I suppose anyone that can't get to Thurles will be able to hear you commentate.
Yeah, I'd say, I heard TJ Ryan on the Examiner referred to it as a biased commentary there a couple of weeks ago, but I'm on Tip FM, so I'm obviously going to be looking at things from a Tipperary point of view. But yeah, we're on.
It's in the name.
FM.
It says Tip in it, so it's going to be biased.
Yeah. So look, Paul, but it's always going to be. I'm going to be happier when Tip score a goal than when someone else scores a goal. Put it that way.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah, we've been accused of the green mist for the last 2 or 3 years on this podcast anyway. So I hope that we were somewhat unbiased this morning. But Paul, thanks a million for coming on and joining us. Hopefully you'll be more upset than I am on Sunday afternoon when we see you after that commentary. But look, it's going to be a brilliant game. Limerick and Tip rarely fails or rarely disappoints. So hopefully it's going to be another instant classic in the Munster Championship. And I presume Thurles will be lifting like 𝘰𝘏 𝘰𝘪 and the Gaelic crowds and all those teams have been. So for now, Paul, thanks a million for joining us, and hopefully we'll talk in 5:30 on Sunday.
Spot on, lads. Talk to you then. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Now, Paul Carroll from Tipp FM there, giving us the Tip view ahead of a mouth-watering game this Sunday, Matt. Just even talking about it there kind of whets the appetite. You really can't, Limerick have been fairly dominant in the fixture, as we've alluded to in recent years, but this is one you just couldn't call.
You just couldn't call, and then the permutation. There's a myriad of permutations there, but were Cork to win, like it actually becomes a de facto knockout game for Limerick.
Yeah. And we mentioned that, that you're not going to know as well. Like, you can't prepare for the fact that it's a knockout championship. If you're Limerick, do you just go and assume Clare or Cork have beaten Clare, in your warm-up and things, take it as a knockout game, because Limerick haven't been in a knockout Munster game in a long time. They've been obviously in all semis and finals.
They have during the pandemic, which is, we were lauding their efforts that whether it was a round robin or whether it was a knockout that Limerick still prevailed. But this is it could be a knockout game with a difference, in that the previous knockout games you had the mindset going into it that this is a knockout competition, Yeah. This is slightly different, and in that there are other circumstances which feeds into it. In other words, what will happen between the white lines in Cusack Park between 2 and 4 o'clock. Will have a big bearing on it, but I have no doubt John Kiely and Paul Kinnerk and Limerick's management team, they have they've been around the block for a long time now, Jack, and there are few sets of circumstances that they haven't encountered. So I think that the sole focus of Limerick, Jack, on next Sunday is win the hurling match. And anything that's happening elsewhere will not feed into their psyche or into their thinking.
No, and they can't really afford to let it sink in, because you can, if you're planning for Cork to be Clare and then Clare be Cork, it could take you off your game and you could relax. You have to look. Limerick are never going to go out and play a blue and gold jersey and take for granted. Just even seeing Tipp line up across you will be motivation enough. And I think it's important that kind of in many ways a spiritual leader on the team, William O'Donoghue, so often sets the tone in the throw-in. And we mentioned the throw-in, but he'll be the man, the first Limerick man probably to touch the ball, and he'll set the tone. And the roar that's going to go up, Matt, on Sunday, wouldn't I just it's Wednesday morning now, like you're really just counting down the hours till 4 o'clock on Sunday afternoon. And like as I said, they've played in 2021, they played in a Munster final. In 2019 they played in a Munster final, but this game feels even bigger than those games, because for Limerick on both those occasions it wasn't necessarily a knockout game, if you get me. It's obviously a Munster final you want to win, but there's a real hope, and I suppose a sense of that Limerick can show us the Limerick of the last 3 or 4 years, that Clare was just a blip. And Paul alluded to it. It was a 1-point loss, with a lot of players didn't fire, and Clare were really up for the game, and Clare are going very well. So this doom and doom talk will be hopefully put to bed on Sunday.
Oh yeah, hopefully, and that we will head for the Gaelic grounds the following week, aiming to qualify for the Munster final. And I think that's going to be the type of discourse that's going to be in the Limerick camp. We've 2 games to win in 8 days. Let's go out and win them.
Yeah, and I suppose two games to win, albeit against 2 exceptionally good Munster Championship side. This Limerick group of players, won 16 out of 17 championship games over the course of 3 years, so they have it in them to go back to back to back and win games in a row. It's a new sort of pressure. They've obviously handled pressure on bigger days, at Ireland finals, Munster finals. So you're just hoping for a performance, close performance we know they can get to, and that should be enough.
Yeah.
Leading into the game as well, just off topic for a minute, Matt, there's obviously been a lot of talk on social media and places like that about certain things regarding the Limerick camp, about players leaving and walkouts and stuff like that. And it's fabricated, first and foremost, but it's just not fair to be making up rumors and spreading things like this about players that are amateur at the end of the day, giving up their spare time to represent their counties. And, we all pay to go to see these games, and GA is making huge money, and it's a brilliant organisation, don't get me wrong. But these players are doing it for the love of the game, first and foremost. And then to see their names and stories about them on social media, that, I could go on now, I could make an account, I could give myself a fake name, and I could say anything about you, Matt, and there's nothing you could do to stop me. It's just not really fair. And we saw, I suppose, a dark side of it during the week.
We did, and I responded to 1 or 2 people in connection with it, because, Jack, I'm absolutely disgusted with the narrative that has been surrounding this Limerick team for all of this year. And if you indulge me for about 3 or 4 minutes, and I'll say why. This is one of the finest hurling teams that the game has ever seen. And you're absolutely right. These players give up of their time, for the honour and glory of their county and for the gratification and pleasure of their supporters. And they've put their lives on hold for the last 5 years. And the narrative started earlier on this year with an invincible tag for Limerick, and that Limerick were unbeatable and all this sort of thing, until John Kiley nailed it in the aftermath of the win over Waterford. When the discourse immediately shifted to Limerick's discipline, if you will recall, and people that should know better, writing what I would call, articles that were erroneous, in my opinion, about Limerick's discipline. Like we all saw the game, and the games, and it takes 2 to tango. And now, when that has failed, we've moved on to this news phase of discourse about Limerick. Look, I love that people are so engaged about this Limerick team, and rightly so. because they are an exceptional team. But the type of stuff that's been going on for the last 2 weeks, utter tripe, utter fabrication, and it has to stop. But Jack, it's coming from outside sources, outside of County Limerick. And maybe the odd individual in Limerick is given credence to it. But this fabrication is coming from people that literally don't know what they're talking about. And it just has to stop.
Yeah, you just implore people that just don't be lying about players and don't be criticizing players, because I suppose we're very slow in many ways to compliment a team and to appreciate the greatness until they win All Ireland or until they do something spectacular. But far quicker as a public we are, to slate someone and to bring someone down. I'm talking about it in general now, not you and I. That you have to do something extraordinary to be praised for it. But one slight little blip and you'll be criticized straight away. So I just encourage people on social media, use your platform, in a positive light. Praise these players that are giving their time. And if there is a mistake or you hear a rumor, don't feed into it. Don't, be putting it out there and, sending these secretive messages, because it only fires up whatever fuel these rumors have. But I just wanted to address that, Matt, and we'll move on.
Yeah, but Jack, keyboard warriors, very, very dangerous. Anonymous keyboard warriors are despicable.
Yeah, that's why I said you could just go on and change your name and your profile picture could be an egg or something and you get away with it. But that's beside the point. Before we move on from Limerick and Tipp, because the first good half hour is devoted to that, and it is the big game of the weekend. Limerick win, or can Tipp get another win and continue their momentum, or do you see another draw in this month's championship?
We're in a new situation. I think the one thing that is hugely important in this, Jack, is Limerick came into the championship after 2 tough league games in successive weeks, and they had a fortnight break before they came in to play Waterford. I think they have 3 weeks now. They've had 3 weeks. Now, Sean Finn is going to be a huge loss. Make no mistake about it. And that is no disrespect to the people that will come in. We have plenty of options in the full back line, but Sean Finn is the best defender in the country. And I believe Limerick will win. I believe that John Kiley will have all his ducks in a row for the next 2 weeks, and he will have said to the lads, "Look, lads, 8 days we can be in a Munster final."
Yeah,
I'm going for Limerick to win, Jack.
Yeah, I'd be agreeing with you there. I think the time away will have done him no harm, and I don't think in the grand scheme of things the loss will have done a huge amount of harm. It might have just refocused him and just showed that if they're not at those levels, that teams can pick them off if they're going very well. But I do think Limerick will respond with a win. I don't think it's going to be one-sided or anything like the league semi-final or the Munster final. I think it'll be very close, tit for tat. But I expect Limerick to come through and set up another mouth-watering tie with Cork in the Gaelic rounds on Sunday week. But this Sunday, 4 o'clock, Thurles. It's headed for a sellout. So if you don't have your ticket yet, there's only terrace tickets available. But do make sure you get your hands on those, because it's one not to be missed. Going on then to the big ball, Matt, and Limerick started off their Tailteann Cup campaign at the weekend. They beat Longford 216-116 in the 2 Gaelic rounds. Probably a bit close for comfort. They led throughout, in fairness. Once Cahill Downs got a goal, it was a goal to 2 points. They never looked back, never relinquished that lead, but it was fairly nip and tuck. But you have to remember, Limerick hadn't won a game since January, since they beat Waterford in the McGrath Cup. So first and foremost, for that Limerick group to get a win, get back in a winning momentum, that would have been the key thing to take away from the Gaelic rounds on Saturday evening.
Sure, Jack. It was massive. Saturday evening was all about winning the football match, no matter how much you won it by. It was all about getting over the line, and they did so. They did so. Like, you must remember, first of all, Jack, that they were without the influential Ian Corbett, who to any football team would be a huge loss. But to get over the line like they did, and were it not for a late goal for Longford, the margin would have been more comfortable. And like even when Longford brought it down to 2 points in injury time, like it was still Limerick that finished on the offensive with Tony McCarthy adding a point to make it a 3-point game. But in the context of the Tailteann Cup, it's a huge win, because I think we were reflecting here last week on permutations in the Tailteann Cup, and we were saying that one win should be enough perhaps to take us through to the knockout stage. And like the importance of next Saturday's game in Dr. Cullen Park cannot be understated, because it has been heightened by the fact that Carroll went to Auckland and beat Wicklow. So it's a straight shootout to be guaranteed to go through to the knockout stages. Because the two losers are meeting, which means that the loser of that game will, for all practical purposes, be out of the competition, and will have no further interest in the Tailteann Cup. So it's a huge game, but it's a fantastic win. And the one thing, we were wondering that in the aftermath of the league, and there was the good performance against Clare, and we were saying to ourselves, is this, just a follow-through from the defeat in the final round of the league and the old enemy Clare and all that sort of stuff? No, it wasn't. To a certain degree, Limerick built on that performance against Clare. So, like, Limerick will be growing in confidence now, and it looks to me like, and I think we said it here last week, that there are very, very strong signs that Limerick are recapturing the form that they showed in the year of promotion from Division 3 to Division 2, which is a very, very good thing. But they cannot underestimate the threat that Carroll will pose. Now, Carroll were 5 points down, going down the home straight against Wicklow, and they kicked the last 6 points. So I think Wicklow probably, maybe to a certain degree, got caught in the hop now. They had met earlier in the championship, and Wicklow had won by 8 points. So that reflected a complete turnaround. But there's also a small bit in it, Jack, as to how teams are actually embracing the competition. And, we were wondering last week, how would Limerick embrace the competition? They're no exception to anybody else. But like we got a very, very, very firm affirmative answer that like it's so pleasing to get first win since January. And it's in terms of the Tailteann Cup, the bit of a change around and the bit of a turnaround in fortunes has come just at the right time. And we had Declan Bruder in here last week, and I thought his analysis of it was very good, Jack, and the whole thing. So, hopefully it's onwards and upwards, and like that qualification, possibly directly for the quarterfinals, maybe put to bed next Saturday.
Yeah, that's a bit of hope, but I suppose it's important for Limerick to, continue in a winning way against teams that, not that they necessarily expected to beat them, but they're definitely expecting to be challenging and have a good shot at winning, because the growth in Limerick from, I suppose, 2019 to this year, there was a share of championship victories, Thurles in 2019, and obviously big wins against Waterford, and 2 wins last year were massive. But it's really in the league that we saw the growth of Limerick and the confidence they took from beating teams of a similar ilk and kind of pushed on from them. And that's what the Tailteann Cup provides in a championship scenario. So it's crucial. And you mentioned that they don't just rest on their laurels and say, well, that win should be enough for us to, finish third at the least. That they drive on it and show why they were number one seeds, in the draw.
Absolutely, and they drive on and snaffle a quarter-final place like that. That's hugely important, Jack. Absolutely hugely important. Let the others fight out in the preliminary quarter-final. Like they've sowed the seeds now of a good run, and they've a good base to play off. And I was listening to people saying, "Oh, sure, look, we're going to beat Carroll anyway." Nobody has a right to beat anybody. You have to go out and do it in the day now. Just intersect. Carroll finished third from bottom in Division 4. The only two teams they beat in Division 4 in the league were the two teams below them, London and Waterford. Now, interestingly, they got a draw with Wicklow in the first round. So, obviously, there's a bit of history maybe between those two neighbours. They're very, very close neighbours there in South Leinster. So, I would be taking nothing for granted going to Dr. Cullen Park. It has proved difficult and tricky for us in the past. And I think we've had only... I think the last championship meeting was in 2005, I think, Jack, when Limerick and Carroll met in the qualifiers in Dr. Cullen Park, and we came away with a huge win.
Okay.
But look, Limerick will have to be as good as they were in the last 2 days, and will have to improve. We'll have to go up a notch or two to beat Carroll in Dr. Cullen Park.
And, would Carrow's win over Wicklow probably be a good thing for Limerick? That, they're wary of them now, that they might have just looked at them as fourth seeds and, as you said, poor league form. Whereas now it'll just refocus their minds that this Carroll team are good, they can get the job done. And to be fair, Limerick have been good against teams like this before, that they've put away teams that have been going in good form, and they've been well able to go away to places. They won there in 2020 en route to winning the league. So that win over Wicklow for Carroll will just refocus the Limerick minds just that small bit, if needed.
Oh, well, the Jenny is out of the battle now, Jack, and Limerick are on red alert as to the threat of Carroll, because if they were patting themselves on the back or rubbing their hands and saying, gosh, well, it's job done after Longford. It's not job done. You have to go out and beat Carroll, and you've got to get the job done on the field. And Carroll will be fired up by that victory over Wicklow. That will have done an amount for their confidence. And they have a very wily manager there, the former Kildare player, Niall Carruthers. So, I think it's going to be a tricky game, but I think Limerick will win it, Jack.
Yeah, I do agree with you. I do think Limerick will have enough for Carroll, but it won't be by no means easy. And that's not what Limerick want. Limerick want these tough competitive games against teams in around the same divisions as them. So it'll be an interesting one. It'll be a difficult one, but only be hoping Mark Fitzgerald's side can win. That's 2 wins on the bounce. They'll be safe then, that they can go into the final round and look to, I suppose, secure a quarter-final place at the first time of asking. That's at 3:00 this Saturday at Netwatch Cullen Park in Carroll. Limerick taking on the hosts in the second round of the Tailteann Cup. So the best of luck to them. Since we last recorded, Matt, there was obviously huge news for Limerick football, and news might be the wrong word. A huge victory for Limerick football for the first time since 1956. The Miners won a piece of silverware, and it wasn't the Munster Championship outright, but the Phase 1 title, beating a Tipperary side that were relatively comfortable against them in the first round. But as we had said, John Ryan and his side have steadily progressed through the Phase 1 Championship and were full value for the victory, Matt, against Tipperary. They took an early enough lead. They kicked 6 in a row, and Tipp came back to them. But a Dara Hogan goal and huge resilience down the home straight gave Limerick a 1-9 to 1-6 win in the Phase 1 final. A bit of silverware for Limerick, and more signs of progression of the academy, as Declan Bruder alluded to last week, and just good for Limerick to get some silverware.
Sure, look, it was fantastic, and we had John in here a couple of weeks ago, and he exudes passion for the game. But certainly that night, I saw the game in the first round, and Tipperary won it 111 to 7 points. It was double scoring, but it wasn't, Jack, and I said it here last week, it was not about how good Tipperary were that night. It was how poor Limerick were that night. It was a very, very, very poor performance. Coming into a championship game, everything that a manager could fear to go wrong went wrong on that particular night. So, we saw more of the Limerick that. Like, having said that, you could see that there was a certain potential in the Limerick team, and I think that came to the fore in the second round against Clare and Milltown Malbay. And then they backed it up with the win over Waterford, and they're 15 players behind the ball. But they found a way to break through that nonsense. But I certainly wasn't writing it off going to Mallow last Thursday evening. I think we said it here last week that Limerick had every chance, and that's the way it transpired. And Limerick showed fantastic resilience. They raced into that lead, were hauled back. Tipperary went ahead, and you say to yourself, after half-time, Tipperary now are finding their mojo, as it were. But no, Limerick put a stop to it, and that Dara Hogan goal. But it was fantastic, and it had to be a major boost to John Ryan and his entire squad. The fact that Aidan O'Shea, the team captain, was able to play. It was, you will recall, it was he missed the entire group stage through injury, and he essentially is the only survivor from last year's team, and he was an influential figure in last year's team. So, going into the game against Kerry and Newcastle West, we'll see a much better Aidan O'Shea. He was good in Mallow, but the fact that he'll have 60 minutes under his belt, will stand to him big time. And himself and Evan Curry, they have been formidable. Like they're as good a minors as you'll get in any county. But it is. I suppose in many ways it's a free hit for Limerick on Thursday night, because you don't know where Kerry are at, and you don't know what's going on between Cork and Kerry, and last year, Cork went to Kerry in the first round, lost by 14 points, met 3 weeks later in the Munster final and won by 11. Just have a suspicion, is there some kind of shenanigans going on, and we'll wait until the real business, So, it would be very, very good for the game. It would be very, very good. It would be very, very good for the game of football if the 𝘬𝘰 𝘠𝘬𝘪𝘢 was upset. I expect Limerick to give Kerry plenty of it. Now, it's going to be very, very hard to beat. They're going to be very, very hard to beat. I was told from sources in Kerry about 6 or 8 weeks ago that Kerry had a very, very good minor team this year. But I seem to think that Kerry always seem to think that they have very, very good at, and invariably they are. So I'm writing off the defeat to Cork in last Thursday night. I'm quite satisfied. We may not have seen the real Kerry, but look, Jack, when last did Limerick win 3 minor football championship matches in the 1 year? And you referenced the academy there. It's only 2021, Jack, that we contested the Munster final and led against Cork with 10 minutes to go. And now we have this development, winning 3 Munster championship matches in a row. Definitely the green shoots are there from the academy. No doubt about it.
100%. And doing my research, I had to go back to 2012 to the last time they played Kerry in the minor championship. Now, you might have found something in the meantime, but these chances...
No, I did not.
these chances to play Kerry are few and far between at this level, and it'll be extremely difficult. And if they don't win, they don't win. But it's a good chance for these boys to play Kerry, because we were hoping in 4 or 5 years' time that they've graduated onto a senior team and that they will be getting to the likes of Munster finals, the way the trajectory of Limerick football has been going. So to have played them at minor and know exactly what you're facing into, it's all positive getting to these latter rounds of the Munster Championship.
Absolutely. Well done to Kevin Deenahan 2 years ago and getting them to the Munster final. Well done to John Ryan this year. For turning it around after the first round defeat. You could that night in McNeville Park, you could very, very easily have become despondent and said to yourself, "To hell with this," what's this all about? But speaking to John after, there was a steely determination like that. They were going to show their true potential over the remaining games of the group stages and see where it would take them. And we see now where it has taken them. They have bridged the gap of 67 years and picked up a first bit of silverware.
Yeah, and they're getting, as I said, ever better in every game. So there was improvement from Tipp to Clare to Waterford, back to Tipperary. So hopefully more improvement, and it will be needed if we are to upset the odds. But as you said, it's pretty much a free hit for John Riney's side. Obviously, they go at every game. They want to win. But when you're faced against Kerry in the Munster Championship, whether it's senior, 21s or minor, Kerry are always going to be favourites. So the best to look to John and his side. Winning phase one probably would have been the goal first and foremost, and to get into a Munster Championship outright. They've done that, so hopefully they can continue in the same vein. But main thing is get a performance. Show Kerry that you're not there just to take part. You're there to win the game, and we'll see where it goes from there. That game is 7:15 on Thursday night in Newcastle West.
But Jack, you probably heard him saying it, and I definitely heard him saying it on a couple of occasions. He said it here to us 2 weeks ago. John is at pains to laud the format of the minor championship, and even after that defeat that night. It was one point he made that this was a great competition, a great format. And, if you have a manager are embracing it like that, you're on a winner, like really that. As I say, look, it is we're in a new place. Like, we have won 3 Munster minor football championships in 1 year. Which, didn't. And actually, I think the year we won it in 56, we only won 2.
I don't know. I wasn't around for that. I was a while to come yet. But look, a piece of silverware, regardless what it is, it'd be like essentially winning the league, at that level. You're playing teams of your own kind of standard. And to beat them all and to recover from Tipperary has been a great sign, these young lads. So please God that they can drive on to Kerry this Thursday night in Newcastle West, and give us more good days. Obviously, Tipperary are meeting Cork in the other round, or the other side of the draw in the other semi-final. So the best luck to John Ryan and his team. Before we round out today, Matt, I know you wanted to talk about it. Andrew Sexton, who might be known to the Limerick community, there's a fundraiser being organised in aid of Andrew, who was diagnosed with a bone cancer, 𝘕𝘰𝘦𝘭𝘴 𝘔𝘦𝘯𝘴𝘰𝘪𝘢𝘵. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong, but diagnosed with that, has had battle with that for the best part of a year so far, Matt, and it's a long journey back. But it's been a fundraiser has been organised. There's a golf classic coming up in Charleville at the end of July, and I know it's something that you want to talk about here.
I do, Jack. It saddens me to see Andrew, who I know very, very well, stricken. Andrew Sexton is a wonderful human being, Jack. He's 41 years of age. He comes from a family that are synonymous with the GA. His brother Mike, a well-known referee, another brother John, a former inter-county referee. They've given a lifetime. He's one of 9 or 10 brothers. They've given a lifetime to the GA, and he has been stricken with this now since last October. and he's been out of work, and he's going to be out of work for another at least 12 months. So the family and friends are rallying around him, and they're holding a golf classic in Carroll Golf Club on the 21st and the 22nd of July. And if anybody is interested, or any clubs out there would be interested in putting in a team and supporting Andrew, it's the Andrew Sexton Golf Classic. Now, Andrew played for Brewery for many years and played up to recently, actually, and he was involved in coaching with Brewery, with Hospital Herberstown, with Staker Wallace, and he's the type of chap that, he would always want to give something back. But they've also established a GoFundMe page, Jack, and it's Andrew Sexton Brewery Fundraiser. So if anybody that would like to make a contribution, they're aiming to raise 15,000 to help defray his expenses, because he will be commuting to and from Dublin for most of the next 12 months as part of his treatment. So I would appeal to anybody that has a few quid to spare, if they would go into the GoFundMe Andrew Sexton fundraiser and maybe make a contribution to it. It would be greatly, greatly appreciated. We're talking about a series. I'd appeal to the GA family that we're talking about a serious member of one of our own, and Andrew Sexton. I'm so saddened to hear about his infliction at the moment, but let's hope everything will be okay at the end of the day. But for the moment, he's incurring considerable expenses. He's out of work. He's a wife and 5 children. So I would appeal that anybody that can would give something to the fundraiser.
Yeah, I'd echo that sentiment, Matt. Andrew Sexton Brewery fundraiser on GoFundMe. You'll find it in different places, and if you want, to support a worthy cause and get a day out golfing, I'm sure it'll be a lovely couple of days in Charleville, 21st, 22nd of July, and please God, Andrew can make a swift recovery with the aid of those people helping.
As well as looking for teams to take part in the Golf Classic, Jack, they're also looking for tea sponsorship.
Yeah, so
so there's a myriad of ways that people can contribute and help Andrew on hopefully his road to a full recovery.
Yeah, the last thing you need is to worry about money. So any little helps, and Andrew will be on the road recovery sooner rather than later, please God. And again, it says in the GoFundMe, one of his main loves in life is GA, and it just does bring people together and brings communities together. So hopefully, as much money as possible can be raised. If anyone has a few spare pound, as you said, to donate, do make sure to do that. Yeah. Andrew Sexton Brewery fundraiser on GoFundMe. And Matt,
but other connections are Christopher Sexton in Kildima Palace Kinry is another brother, and as is Paul Sexton, who's the former Limerick Camogie manager. So, and Eamon Sexton is very, very involved with Brewery. So you can see that the family are totally immersed in the GAA. Lawrence, another brother, is a regular umpire at all matches. So any one of them, they've their contribution to the GAA over the years has been enormous, and I think it's incumbent on everybody to rally around Andrew at this stage.
Yeah, and to be fair, the GAA community does so often rally around when needs be. So hopefully this will be the same, and the best of luck to Andrew in his recovery. Matt, I've looking at my notes here that there's nothing we've missed as of yet. Obviously, you spent an awful lot of time. You have something there?
I have. I would just like to say congratulations to the Limerick under-16 Camogie team, who had a very, very good win in the All-Ireland A Championship. Now, we know, and we had Dermot Ryan in here, and couple of weeks ago when they won the Munster Championship. Now, they subsequently lost to Cork in the first round. But they went to Kilkenny in the second round last Sunday to Freshford and won by 2 goals and 6 points to 1 goal and 8 to relaunch their championship bid. Now, they host Galway in Fedamore on this Sunday at 2 o'clock. And we wish them the best of luck. You must remember that these girls are competing at the highest possible level. It's the A Championship. We're talking about the Corks, the Kilkennys, the Galways, the Tipperaries. We're talking about Camogie Elite here. And they're more than holding their own. So we wish the girls, congratulate them on the great win against Kilkenny. It is rarely that we have a championship win over Kilkenny at any level. And wish them the very, very best of luck against Galway and Fedamore on Sunday.
Yeah, I echo that. The best of luck there against Galway. As you said, it's rare enough to beat Kilkenny, so you enjoy those victories whenever you get them. But Matt, just over 1 hour and 5 on the clock. Spent the bones of the first 40 minutes talking about Limerick and Tipperary. All roads lead to Thurles this Sunday afternoon. Obviously, the day before, the huge clash for Limerick in the Tailteann Cup against Carroll in Carroll. So a busy episode put down. A huge thank you, as always, to Knowles Menswear, our sponsor, for getting on board. Big thank you to everyone listening. Anyone watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe and turn on the notifications. It just helps the algorithm a lot and it can spread the word. On Facebook, like and share. On Twitter, retweet and like and do all that good stuff just to help expand this ever-growing community as we support Limerick throughout the year and the clubs and further afield as well. To you, Matt, as always, and to everyone listening, before we go, in 3 words, as we head into the third round of the Munster Championship, who will be the last 3 left standing in Munster in about 10 days' time when Cork and Limerick is brought to close on Sunday week? Who will be the last 3?
Cork, Tipp and Limerick.
Ooh. So you're back in Cork to be Clare, Limerick to be Tipp, and then Tipp to be Waterford.
I might be totally wrong, Jack, but I think Cork will... Cork are used to this situation, Jack. They're very good in this type of situation. Even this particular team, like they lost the first 2 games last year and went to Waterford in Walsh Park in the 3rd round and dug out a fairly handsome win, so, and didn't beat Tipperary in the final round to get through. So I think they will go with the same mindset to Tailteann on Sunday. And the only fear is that they'd come with the same mindset to Limerick the following week. But, were they to win in Ennis on Sunday, the pressure will be off Cork.
Yeah. I had originally said Cork and Waterford, so obviously one of them is gone, but I always fancied Cork. And I think Limerick, just the way it has fallen, I think Limerick will beat Tipp and Tipp will beat Waterford. So it's looking like Limerick, Cork, and Tipp, but we've been left with egg in our faces with regards Clare before, so we won't hold our breath there. But just a quick one to finish the podcast. Nearly 1 hour and 10. Matt, as always, a pleasure. Thank you to everyone watching and listening. I cannot wait for the 2 games at the weekend, Limerick in football on Saturday, and obviously that huge hurling game on Sunday. So a huge thank you to everyone for tuning in and getting involved, and to Knowles Menswear as always. Thank you and good luck.
Thanks, Jack.
The impression of the game you get out with what you put into is like a walk of life. If you're good enough, go out and get it, no more about it.
Not so much control in the centre of the field from Kilkenny as Richie Bennett sends it high and over the bar.
Your mother sends you down to the shop for a pound's worth of goods and she gives you 50 pence. You can't get the pound's worth of goods, can you?
Just about kept in. Oh, well done, Johnny Buckley. To do that to Tomas O'Shea, he deserves to score from here. One of the highlights of the Sunday game.
Limerick went out there from the 𝘢𝘴𝘴𝘰𝘪𝘢𝘵𝘪𝘰𝘯 no more about it. They made all the running, that was it. Put the ball over the bar and the tactic, and that's it. No ifs, no buts.
Is there much time left? We have a couple of injuries. Here comes 𝘢𝘴𝘴𝘰𝘪𝘢𝘵𝘪𝘰𝘯𝘓 of the right brigade. 45 metres out. He's a chance to score.
no sympathy in this game.